Chairman Salmon. Thank you, Chairman Salmon, Ranking Member Sears, and Chairman Royce, members of the subcommittee and full committee. It's very critical, extremely critical, that we're holding this hearing today, and I can't thank you enough for doing so. I also want to say thank you to all the members who made it a point to come back for this hearing today, but you have to understand that your peers must recognize the fact that veterans are watching today, and for those of them who did not come back, this will be remembered. While the scope of this hearing is limited to the case of Sergeant Andrew Tamorisi, I'd be remiss to remind this committee that Andrew's case is merely a symptom of a greater policy failure in how we address the needs of all of our returning soldiers. The failure is unfortunately even more pronounced when it comes to PTSD. And we throw this term around very lightly, but we have to recognize is that 30,000 new cases of traumatic brain injury occur every year in our services. And it doesn't matter whether or not soldiers go into a combat situation or not. The majority are from training exercises. We currently have over 600,000 veterans suffering from residual symptoms from traumatic brain injury right now in the VA system. And I'll tell you, no ifs, ands, or buts, our veterans from Iraq and Afghanistan often feel absolutely abandoned by our government, and I believe that they have a reason to feel so. Before I begin, my testimony is definitely longer than 5 minutes, so I'm going to synopsize and make sure I yield to others, but there's some points that I think really clearly have to be made. As we've addressed it over and over again, Andrew made a wrong turn, and we've thrown out a couple of terms related to PTSD with that by saying hypervigilance. But we've got to slow down for just a second and take a minute and understand what that means. Though Jill can't say it and others won't say it, we know for a fact that Sergeant Tamorisi's time in this prison has been worse than his time in both combat situations. He's going to come back to the United States and have to be treated for his combat PTSD, but also his incarceration PTSD. And to me, this is an abomination. 6 months. He didn't hesitate to say, aye, aye, sir, to go off and serve. How dare we? How dare we, as a nation, hesitate to get that young man back? We sit here in this city and discuss sending more young people off to die. I have a son who's 21 years old who's asked me over and over again, Dad, should I serve? And right now I'm telling him no. That's coming from a guy who did 22 years in the service. But no, because our government doesn't respect you enough. And how dare they treat him the way they do and the way they will. Andrew's incident is clearly triggered by his PTSD. The hypervigilance, when he made that turn while in Mexico, he made a decision to leave. When he got in his car, he was probably already triggered. And just so some of you understand, I suffer from MS. I have scars in my brain that are synonymous with concussive brain injury. So some of the symptoms that I'm talking about are symptoms that I live through on a daily basis. Emotional lability, sometimes depression, sometimes hypervigilance. I can walk in this hallway in Congress where I'm most protected and be afraid to walk in that bathroom. This is what these young men live through. And it's sad that we have one of our own right now being held in a prison while we talk about it. It is clear. Everyone understands he is not going to get the treatment that he is due. He has served the time, I believe, for any crime that he could have committed. So bring him home and let's treat him appropriately. But his treatment is not going to just be for combat PTSD. And remember, his treatment for his PTSD from being in prison rests on our shoulders. Now, I want to clearly say, I have the utmost respect for the Mexican government and the Mexican people. I am not one of those who is going to join into the fray of screaming for invasions and all those things. But what I am going to scream for is the one part of political diplomacy that has not been used yet. And Congressman Salmon, you pointed it out. It's called political compassion. Compassion is what's needed right now. Woe be it to us to let this case go by and then have to deal with the other 600,000 soldiers who are suffering who could make the same mistake. My testimony is much longer than 5 minutes. I would please ask the members to read the entire thing. I synopsized for you, but I'd like to leave you with one other little point. Every nation on this planet and all people are judged, no matter what religion you are, whatever faith you are, we are all judged by what we do for the least of us. Andrew is one of the best of us, America's treasure. And if we can't treat the best better than we treat the worst, how dare you ask another gentleman to put on a uniform? Thank you so much, sir.